Professional wrestling has long been touted as an industry where very few personal relationships can survive, let alone thrive. Marriages, family ties, friendships, even simple business relationships have been ruined forever by the constant toil of sports entertainment. You see, with the pressures of performing and traveling and, well, everything else, wrestlers face an almost unbelievable challenge to maintain even the most basic relationship. Of course, some of these that fail go beyond mere anecdotal worth and leave a trail of destruction in their wake. I'm What Culture's Adam Cleary, and these are 7 real-life wrestling relationships that ended in disaster. Now, before we start, that is ended in disaster, not ended in tragedy. Might not sound like much, but the difference is subtle, and we won't be getting into anybody's death.
Number 7. Shawn Michaels and Sonny. The worst kept secret in the industry at the time, Shawn Michaels and Sonny's relationship not only irreversibly damaged Chris Candido's career, but also led to a chain of events that would further fracture HBK's relations with Bret Hart. Candido and Sonny were a package deal in Smoky Mountain Wrestling and then later WWF, but Tammy's model looks and shrewd understanding of wrestling nuances made her a different commodity altogether as the company tiptoed closer to the Attitude Era. By late 1996, WWE wrote Candido off television, and her affair with Michaels had already begun. With the latter considered almost impossible to deal with by the locker room at that point, and the two allegedly under the influence of a number of things, it was a recipe for, well, nothing good. After numerous fallings out between the two, Michaels cut his infamous Sunny Days promo in which he implied she was also sleeping with Bret Hart. Both have always denied the claim, but it led to a real-life fight between the company's 2 top stars just weeks later. And yes, we all know what happened next. Number 6. Triple H and Stephanie McMahon. Watching Triple H's in-house documentary Thy Kingdom Come on the WWE Network presents the embryonic stages of his relationship with Stephanie McMahon. The respective mothers and fathers pass comments on these crazy kids getting butterflies and stealing kisses, but the tale conveniently ignores third-party China. After all, she was quietly shifted from the organisation following her breakup with Hunter that looked almost entirely due to his budding romance with the boss's daughter. She was the first victim of the industry's most powerful couple, but she wouldn't be the last. On screen and occasionally off, the duo have allegedly verbally and physically castrated countless performers for no justifiable storyline reason other than protecting their egos. They are, admittedly, both doing quite a good job though, so yeah, swings and roundabouts. Number 5. Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage. The love-hate relationship between Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage had all the narrative beats of a traditional wrestling storyline, with the quiet exception of a happy ending. Having briefly worked together in 1985, the two became a wrestling supergroup in 87 when the recently turned Savage found himself on the wrong end of a 3-on-1 attack. Things went brilliantly until Hogan's departure from the company in 93 left behind bad blood, as Savage spoke on air of his disdain for the Hulkster, privately blaming him for the real-life breakdown of his marriage with Elizabeth. Randy's midlife crisis 2003 hip-hop album, Be a Man, was an unapologetic public call-out of Hogan, but he seemed somewhat less keen when the two briefly crossed paths in TNA. Sadly, they never reconciled before Macho Man's untimely death in 2011, but Hogan did posthumously induct him into the Hall of Fame. Number 4. Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels. The complete personal and professional breakdown between Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart robbed both men of a harmonious working relationship and the wider wrestling audience of a match befitting their incredible talents. Though their Survivor Series 97 contest has merit and their divisive WrestleMania 12 Iron Man match is a spectacular athletic pursuit, they were never on the same page long enough to enter into a program that would actually spin off into a good blowout match. Vince, ever the mischievous little imp, cannily channeled their deep-rooted hatred for one another via months of corrosive microphone wars, but the intended matches just never ever materialised. Partly due to injuries, but mostly because they couldn't stand each other. Their famous reconciliation in a 2010 edition of Monday Night Raw remains one of the more profound segments for fans of a certain age, but it still remains regretful that such hatred even existed in the first place. Number 3. Scott Hall and Kevin Nash. The bond between Kevin Nash and Scott Hall was at times capable of transforming whichever organisation fostered it, but it was paradoxically lethal when the pair were given free rein. A beautiful friendship that was solidified in WWE's mid-90s doldrums, the matches featuring Hall, Nash, Michaels and the 1-2-3 Kid gave the company faint hope of a brighter future. However, this input was often at the expense of their colleagues. Crudely, but in fairness, accurately assessing wrestling as a solo capitalist venture, the pair used their in-ring expertise and dynamic philosophies to maintain a grip on the best spots in the promotion. Their arrival to WCW and subsequent formation of the New World Order took an industry on life support and converted it into a mainstream obsession. But their increased freedom inevitably brought bad things. Hall's delicately balanced substance abuse problems spiraled, whilst Nash's booking contributed to the company's dramatic downward spiral. Still, I am told they are both top lads. Number 2, Davey Boy and Diana Smith. As Helen Hart recapped in the seminal Wrestling with Shadows documentary, all her sons became wrestlers and all her children married into the business. It was the blessing and curse of life as a Hart family member, but the dynamic was blown wide open after BRET left WWF in 1997. Dividing lines were quickly drawn, with the paths only becoming more jagged after Owen Hart tragically fell to his death in 1999. Davey Boy had always been a BRET loyalist, but a nightmare WCW run left him out of pocket and out of action after injuring his back on a section of the ring gimmicked for an Ultimate Warrior surprise entrance. His controversial WWF return later that year was a sad end to an otherwise brilliant wrestling career. But before his death, Diana Smith wrote in her admittedly widely discredited autobiography of the life Smith led as a wrestler. Amongst other allegations, she claimed Davey had innumerable drug addictions, including but not limited to painkillers, cocaine, and steroids. She also made a number of horrifying claims about both sexual and physical abuse she'd suffered during their marriage, but the book was removed from publication after Martha Hart, Owen's widow, threatened to sue. Number 1, Vince McMahon and Ted Turner. Ah yes, the rivalry that in part came to define mainstream professional wrestling in the 90s. Ted Turner's phone call to Vince McMahon after acquiring Jim Crockett Promotions in 1988 relit a fire that had lay dormant for 4 years since McMahon tried and failed to broadcast WWF on Turner's Superstation. The duo came together on a day that would later be known as Black Saturday, as Turner begrudgingly welcomed Vince's product into the slot that had screened Georgia Championship Wrestling for the previous 12 years. GCW loyalists were in complete shock when their regular dose of professional wrestling was interrupted by the grand purveyor of sports entertainment. This, despite billionaire Ted's flat rejection of the idea in '83. The show predictably tanked. This led an enraged Turner to load his network with additional wrestling programming more attuned to his audience. It comfortably outperformed Vince's product, so he went a step further. Acquiring Jim Crockett's formative World Championship Wrestling, he infamously let McMahon know, "I'm in the wrestling business." The words stuck in McMahon's throat until the day he bought the virtually Turnerless WCW in 2001.
Well, would you look at that? You got all the way to the end of the video and your mother said you'd amount to nothing. What are the chances? While you're here, why not watch one of our other many possibly quite good channels, or watch another video which will be largely in the same vein as the quality content you've just endured. Go on then.